State at home this weekend hosting Texas A&M. Bulldogs will be home for 4 of the next 6 weekends. 3 straight home games against A&M, Arkansas, and UMass. Road trip to Tennessee, open date, and then Missouri at home and Egg Bowl on the final weekend of the regular season. Playing that game on Friday, November 29th. Bulldogs looking for some wins down the stretch. Let's talk about their game on Saturday. On the road at Georgia, 41-31 was the final. There was some good here for Mississippi State. Bulldogs took the early lead, 3-0. Georgia answered with a field goal to make it 3-3. Took the lead late in the first quarter to go up 10-3. Then it was 13-3 after another field goal. Mississippi State cut it back to a 3-point game when Michael Van Buren connected with Kelly Akari on a 24-yard touchdown pass, made it 13-10. And then Georgia able to get 2 more touchdowns in the final 6 minutes of the second quarter before halftime. Georgia scored to push it out to 34-10 on their opening possession of the third quarter. Then a couple of touchdowns by Mississippi State, a rushing touchdown and a passing touchdown, got it back to a 10-point game. Georgia pushed it back out to 17, and then the final touchdown for Mississippi State came, another Kelly Akari reception with 1:47 to play. 41-31 the final. Michael Van Buren in his second start goes 20 of 37 with 3 touchdown passes, goes for over 300 yards, had 306 on the day, and was picked off 1 time. Running game was not a big part of it for Mississippi State, understandably so, against that Georgia defensive front, just 79 yards rushing, 1 touchdown on the ground for the Bulldogs. Hey, Dad, let's start with takeaways. What do you take away from Saturday, a loss? I know I made a joke earlier. I was just giving you a hard time more than anything. Nobody's doing the moral victory thing, but for the second week in a row against the top 5 team, Mississippi State more than held their own.
Yeah. They're getting better offensively. You have to make that distinction. Defensively, they are not getting better, and I don't think they will. But the way I put it on the podcast, and you tell me if you disagree, let's say that I told you in June that, hey, State's going to go 11-1 this year. And the one loss is going to be at Georgia. They lose 41-31. You're like, wow, okay, that's not a bad loss at all on an 11-1 team. So with the way State is now, that's a great performance, all things considered. You would like to win, but that was highly unlikely. They put up, I think I saw a stat that snaps a 30-game streak for Georgia of giving up 30 or less at home. Van Buren, is there anything more exciting when you're a struggling team, especially, than a young quarterback who's performing well? I mean, you just look at him and you go, there's the future. That's the guy we're going to build around. He looked great. The first half he was antsy, and it showed. Didn't throw the ball well, but something clicked for him midway through the second quarter, and he never looked back from there. Was throwing the ball with great precision, great distance down the field. State couldn't run the ball worth a darn, so he was doing it all on his own, basically. These are the kind of games I thought State would be losing, right, where they do enough offensively, they just can't get any stops.
Yeah. And
that's what this was. The problem is this for State, is that it just doesn't get any easier. I guess technically, by the semantic definition, it does get easier because you just played number 1 and then you played number 5. This week you played number 15. So I guess technically that is easier, but A&M, tough. Arkansas, much better than you thought they were going to be. Tennessee on the road, very tough. Missouri at home, they're going to be playing for wins if they want to have any shot at the playoff. And then Ole Miss at the end of the season, I mean, the Egg Bowl is what it is. You could be a lot better in the second half of the season and still go 2-10. So they just, what they need to do this week, if they can't win, they have to keep stacking up quality performances. I think if they could lose this week to A&M, something like, I don't know, just give me 38-28, close game, and A&M just pulls it out in the end, they'd have a real chance with Arkansas, I think. Arkansas is a game you could definitely win if you're Mississippi State. They can win this week. They have to do a lot more, and they need some more to go wrong for A&M to do it. But you've got some pieces to build around. You've got a legit SEC receiving core. Craver, Coleman, and Akari, he had his first big game this week.
Mm-hmm.
That's three guys to build around. And Traore was pretty good this week too. Defensively, it just is what it is, man. They were able to force a couple of turnovers, and maybe that's going to be the key, is trying to get the ball back as much as you can, but you don't really have playmakers that can go do that for you. They're just not a good defensive team, and they're not well coached, and they don't have a lot of talent, so it's a bad situation there.
If you go back to Toledo, when you walked away from that one going, okay, everything about this defense is bad. They're not tackling. They are not skilled enough. They don't have talented enough players. The scheme is not good. The coaching, like all of the things. Has some of that gone away? Do you feel like they're better prepared, and from a scheme standpoint, like it's simply just down to they just don't have enough talent on that defensive side of the ball?
There's still some questions about what they're doing schematically, in my opinion. Putting some of the coverages they're putting out there. Putting safeties out there in one-on-one matchups, which has just been a problem the past few years. Still running that. If you're going to run a three-man front, you've got to have a Jeff Simmons kind of guy in the middle that can eat up blockers. You can't just go out there with mediocre, average players and hope to be successful running three-man front. So, I think that there's still a lot of coaching issues with Hutzler. He's still trying to find his way. Unfortunately, I just don't know that he's ever going to find it, because the end of the season is going to come, and the way things are looking, he won't be here next year. So that just kind of is what it is.
Do you think Rylan Lanier just lost where he was on the field?
So we asked, obviously that was asked about today. And Lanier released a statement on social media that was, nobody at State told him to say that. I'll just put it that way. He ended up deleting it. He talked about he was concussed, and I think from what I can tell, he thought that the play he was already in the end zone, and so he just.
If you don't know the play we're talking about, it was a big throw down the middle of the field on what looked like a post route, and Lanier is chasing, and he kind of gets his arms around him, and it looks like all he's got to do is like wrap him up and bring him to the ground, and he just let go.
Yeah, and it's going to be first and goal at the 3. Georgia's probably still going to score, but
probably
you never know. And all three of us played football. If there's one thing that is universal with every coach, it is play until the whistle, and no whistle there. And it just looks like a really poor effort play. Lebby talked about it. He said we spoke. He knows that's not the acceptable standard, and I don't expect it'll happen again. But yeah, that play looks really bad. When you look, because he just let him go into the end zone, and in a 10-point game, who knows? Like I said, who knows what happens on first and goal? You never know; they might just snap it over somebody's head and you recover it. So that can't happen again. Lanier's been a guy, he's been up and down this year, but that's true about everybody on this defense, and it's been more down than up for the most part.
Yeah.
Isn't it true though? Flipping back to their side, what you said at the beginning, that yes, that they're clearly getting better, but take just the last 2 weeks. This is the thing that I was thinking about all day going into the show, is like, how am I going to talk about what I've seen the last 2 weeks? Flashback to June, July. What we wanted to see from this Mississippi State team this year. And it was more about, forget the record, don't look at the record, look at whether or not they belong on the field. And against two of the top 5 best teams in college football, I like what they have at wide receiver. They've got some good pieces there. Bright young quarterback, very, very early in his career. This Mississippi State offense does not, quote-unquote, belong on the field from a talent, pedigree, recruiting ranking perspective with Georgia and Texas's defense when you look at them from a talent, recruiting ranking perspective on paper. And yet they have had, in both games, receivers running wide open, uncovered. And especially this past Saturday, it was like that in the running game. You had running lanes where it's like, wait, how does a hole that big develop? And that is what good coaching does. They are scheming guys open. They are scheming large running lanes. And that, you didn't get that the first few weeks, of course, but that is what you hired Jeff Lebby for. Yeah. That right there, offensively, is exactly what you hired Jeff Lebby for. And they will get better offensively, talent-wise, I think, as long as he's given the appropriate time to build.
And don't you think, hey, Dad, that after Florida, Jeff Lebby was like, okay, we've got to figure out something offensively because we're not doing anything with what we're trying to do. And they went back and they evaluated and they figured out some things.
Some changes.
They've slowed the tempo down a little bit, and they're doing some different things offensively.
And they looked the play calling was more creative, like the touchdown to Akari, one of the fourth down conversions to Traore. Those are plays we haven't seen yet. They looked much better offensively.
Sports Talk Mississippi, 93,033. Remember, Kirby kind of got after the Georgia fans after their last home game against Auburn. How was the crowd for Georgia and Mississippi State on Saturday? Just fine, whatever.
I mean, it looked like a decent crowd.
I mean, I'm sure it was packed.
Yeah,
like they sell out every game.
I mean,
I didn't know if it felt big energy, like they were into it, or
as much as it could be, I guess.
Yeah, day games just have a different vibe.
Yeah.
What about the Kirby shove on Marty Van Buren?
So Smart addressed that. He said that when he went back and watched the film, he immediately called Lebby, spoke with Van Buren. My guess is the apologies were limited to the private conversations because in his public statement, he didn't say anything about, I'm sorry, which I thought was odd. But it's kind of surprising that the refs didn't throw a flag and that the SEC had, I mean, I understand it was an accident, but accident or not, first of all, accident's not the right word. Accident is, something happens and you just bump into them. He shoved somebody. He was going to shove somebody on his sidelines. It shouldn't be okay that he was going to shove one of his own assistant coaches or his own players. You're not allowed to shove people if you're a coach, I don't think. So I'm surprised that the conference hasn't come out today. We had a joke going in the press conference today because in the SEC's release that listed Michael Van Buren as the SEC Freshman of the Week, it said led the Bulldogs to a thrilling 31-27 victory over Georgia. And I was like, wow, they docked him 2 touchdowns for that. That's pretty bold by the SEC. I'm surprised that nothing's come from the conference in terms of discipline. I don't expect him to be suspended for a game or anything, but, just a, he's been warned kind of thing. That's unacceptable and blah, blah, blah. But that being said, it's not a huge story to me. This isn't Woody Hayes decking a Clemson player, but it is something that I was surprised in the heat of the game it wasn't addressed.
I would not have expected anything in the heat of the game, but I kind of would have expected an announcement from the SEC that he'd been fined.
You fine coaches for saying, hey, the refs were bad today. You should also fine a coach for shoving an opposing player.
Yeah. Just surprising.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's par for the course, but I don't think that he got enough just general media public criticism for it either.
And obviously fans are just going to support their guy, but the Georgia fans, he was trying to do. I'm not allowed to shove somebody else out of the way to go talk to somebody. All right, you're not. That's not allowed. You're not allowed to shove people. That's just common courtesy. So I don't care who he thought he was talking to or what he thought he was doing. There's got to just be the simple common sense of, hey, my bad. I'm sorry. Nobody thinks any less of you.
Somebody said to me last night, now it may be a step too far, but I think they're on to something. Now Kirby's a great coach, a championship-winning coach. So I'm not saying that he's not. And this guy wasn't either. But this is the program that has had more than 24 arrests since a tragedy, either involving a vehicle or violence. And their coach cannot control his emotions on the sideline to the point where he's shoving the quarterback of the other team. Maybe those things are connected.
Yeah. And I think it was an accident. I don't think it was an intentional thing, but I think it's something that you just can't have happen, regardless of the reason.